Galactic dark matter halos. An augmented Newtonian dynamics presentation. The observation that stars at the outer edges of spiral galaxies rotate at nearly the same speeds as those near their centers remains one of the central puzzles of modern astrophysics. According to Newton's law, orbital velocity should decline with distance from the mass center as velocity is proportional to the inverse of the square root of the radius. Instead, it remains flat. The discrepancy has traditionally been explained either by positing large, invisible halos of non-luminous matter surrounding galaxies or by modifying Newton's law itself. Neither approach resolves the problem physically. The halo model introduces unseen mass without defining its composition or mechanism, while modified gravity replaces Newton's law with empirical constants devoid of microscopic cause. Both retain the unspoken assumption that space is empty and that gravitational force acts instantaneously across a vacuum. Augmented Newtonian dynamics, and challenges that assumption. It treats space as filled with a real, continuous background of energy, the virtual photon ether, dark matter, that had its origins in the earliest epochs of the Big Bang. Matter interacts not across voids but through this medium. The dynamics of galaxies and the phenomenon known as dark matter can then be understood as natural consequences of the ether's geometry, without invoking exotic particles or altering Newtonian mathematics. Dark matter, limitations of conventional models. The idea of the dark matter halo was born to preserve Newtonian dynamics while explaining the puzzling flatness of galactic rotation curves. Astronomers imagined immense, invisible spheres of mass, halos surrounding every galaxy, made of particles that neither emit nor absorb light. Yet, after decades of research, the evidence remains elusive. First, no such particle has ever been detected, despite the most sensitive instruments searching across every energy range. Second, the supposed halos vary arbitrarily from one galaxy to another, with no unifying law, no consistent density profile, and no predictable scale. Third, no mechanism explains how these halos form, remain stable, or interact with the luminous stars they are meant to govern. And fourth, they serve mathematics, not physics, a convenient correction to equations, but devoid of microscopic reality. Thus, the dark halo model solves an equation but not a mystery. It maintains Newton's law but empties it of meaning, assuming that gravity acts through nothingness. Augmented Newtonian dynamics proposes otherwise, that space is not empty at all, and that the missing mass lies not in unseen particles, but in the energy continuum that pervades the cosmos. Modified Newtonian dynamics. When the dark matter halo failed to yield results, theorists turned to another solution, to alter Newton's law itself. Under the proposal known as modified Newtonian dynamics, or MOND, gravity is adjusted at very low accelerations by introducing a new constant, a. This change helps reproduce some galactic rotation curves, but at a cost. It violates classical energy conservation and introduces an arbitrary acceleration scale with no physical origin. The mathematics works, but the mechanism does not. Instead of explaining the universe, it simply bends the law to fit it. The conceptual gap. Both approaches, the idea of halos of dark matter surrounding galaxies and modified Newtonian dynamics, share the same flaw. They describe the symptom but not the cause. They postulate what gravity does but not how it operates. Without a physical medium, gravitation becomes an abstraction. AND theory restores that missing link by proposing a real substrate through which all interactions occur. Electrons interact with the virtual photon ether, dark matter, at two distinct levels. At one level they are responsible for gravity and at the other they are responsible for the propagation of electromagnetic radiation. The virtual photon ether, cosmological origin and dual-level interaction. In augmented Newtonian dynamics, what we call dark matter is not a collection of invisible particles. It is a field, a sea of virtual photons, born during the earliest light of creation. In the first instant after the Big Bang, energy surged outward faster than light itself in the inflationary epoch of the Big Bang. This era delineated the extent of the newly born universe. In the course of this process, light got stretched, diluting the tremendous original radiance of the newborn universe. The photons of that epoch lost energy until they could no longer interact with matter, yet they did not disappear. They became the invisible foundation of reality, a uniform, non-rotating field of virtual photons filling all space. Each individual photon possessing an energy of about 10 to the power of -51 joules. This field, the virtual photon ether, is transparent, continuous, and incapable of clumping. It carries no measurable density gradients, yet it possesses immense intrinsic energy. Through this medium, both light and gravity find their path. Gravity through self-stabilization. In augmented Newtonian dynamics, gravity is not a primary force but an emergent property of energy self-regulation. Every electron is in perpetual dialogue with the virtual photon ether, emitting and reabsorbing photons at astonishing rates to maintain its internal energy equilibrium. Each of these emissions momentarily aligns the surrounding virtual photons into fine, radial filaments, subtle geometric orderings that extend in all directions. When two bodies exist within the same region of ether, their local alignments interfere constructively along the line joining them, forming a transient bridge of correlated tension. The result is an attraction, not because one body pulls on another, but because both participate in restoring local symmetry within the medium. Gravity, in this sense, arises from the universal tendency of matter to re-establish energy balance through self-stabilization. The cumulative effect of countless microscopic alignments becomes the macroscopic phenomenon we call gravitational attraction. Light radiation through ether alignment. Light, too, emerges from this same dynamic, but as its active counterpart. When an electron undergoes a true energy transition, it emits a real photon, a sustained pulse that travels outward through the ether, promoting the virtual photons along its path into temporary alignment. The absorption and emission of photons takes place at a tremendous rate of hundreds of trillions per second. A receptive electron absorbs a photon and is driven towards the nucleus. It rebounds off the nucleus in keeping with the classical laws of reflection where angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. Since the virtual photon ether is itself composed of dipoles, when a photon is emitted it results in the alignment of the virtual photon ether in the direction of the emitted photon. This creates a line of reinforced coherence, a luminous corridor through which the energy pulse moves at the speed of light. Unlike the isotropic and momentary alignments that underpin gravity, these radiative alignments are directional and enduring, carrying organized energy across the cosmos. As the photon propagates, its energy is relayed from one aligned region to the next, while the geometry of the ether preserves phase, frequency, and polarization. Thus, light and gravity are not separate phenomena but different expressions of the same medium, the first a manifestation of energy transfer, the second of energy equilibrium. The virtual photon ether is cosmological in origin, yet intimately connected to every electron. It is the stage upon which all matter exists, not an abstraction, but the quiet architecture of the universe itself. Photon emission and absorption. According to the Standard Model, photons are described as ripples, excitations of an all-pervading electromagnetic field. While mathematically elegant, this interpretation creates serious conceptual difficulties when confronted with the realities of photon absorption and emission. In this view, photons appear as disturbances that somehow originate elsewhere in the field and then interact with an atom or an electron at a specific point. Yet this picture offers no physical mechanism by which such a diffuse excitation can be precisely created, guided, and absorbed. It becomes difficult to imagine how photons, defined as field oscillations, could be brought to an electron or emitted from it in the sharply localized way demanded by experiment and modern technology. According to augmented Newtonian dynamics, an electron continually seeks to preserve its intrinsic or base energy intact. When it must release energy, it does so by emitting a photon. When it must regain energy, it absorbs one. To accomplish this transfer in a physically meaningful way, the electron, being a charged particle, emits a rapid sequence of minute electric pulses. The initial pulses are stronger than those that follow, and this asymmetry creates a natural polarization within the emission. Because the process occurs in an extraordinarily brief interval, on the order of 10 to the power of -18 seconds, there is no time for the emitted energy to disperse. The interaction between the initial strong pulses and the succeeding weaker ones establishes a stable electric dipole, electrically neutral, yet capable of retaining its energy indefinitely. This self-contained structure constitutes the photon, a coherent, massless entity that can travel unaltered across cosmic distances, even over billions of light-years. Having established the nature of photon emission and absorption, it is now possible to understand how both light and gravity work. Augmented Newtonian dynamics rejects both the notion of wave-particle duality and the idea that the electron exists as an abstract probability wave function within the atom. Instead, theory envisions the electron as a real, solid particle possessing definite mass and finite dimension. This immediately raises a classical question. How can such a charged particle remain stable in orbit around the nucleus when, according to conventional electrodynamics, it should continuously radiate energy and spiral inward, collapsing into the nucleus within a few trillionths of a second? In theory, the electron maintains its stability through a continual process of virtual self-interaction, the constant emission and reabsorption of photons. Each interaction lasts for an infinitesimal interval, so brief that no net exchange of energy occurs. The emission and immediate reabsorption of these photons momentarily align the surrounding virtual photon ether. The collective alignment of this medium constitutes the phenomenon we perceive as gravity. While each virtual interaction is isotropic and fleeting, their enormous frequency, on the order of 10 to the power of 15 per second, produces an average effect that follows the inverse square law. Thus, gravity emerges not as a continuous force, but as the statistical residue of countless self-stabilizing photon interactions within the universal ether, establishing a dynamic equilibrium rather than a loss of energy. The collective alignment of this medium constitutes the phenomenon we perceive as gravity. While each virtual interaction is isotropic and fleeting, their enormous frequency, on the order of 10 to the power of 15 per second, produces an average effect that follows the inverse square law. Thus, gravity emerges not as a continuous force, but as the statistical residue of countless self-stabilizing photon interactions within the universal ether. According to conventional astrophysics, gravity behaves identically everywhere, from the solar system to the largest galaxies. Yet the physical conditions in these environments are entirely different. Within the solar system, gravity is highly centralized. Nearly 99% of the mass lies in the Sun, and the gravitational field is dominated by a single source. In such a compact system, the surrounding ether plays almost no role. The motion of planets can be described accurately using Newton's law. In a galaxy, however, mass is distributed among hundreds of billions of stars, each radiating energy into the surrounding virtual photon ether. The gravitational field of a galaxy is therefore not the product of a single massive center but the result of countless overlapping alignments within the medium. Each star contributes to the organization of the surrounding ether, and the combined effect of these interactions forms a continuous gravitational network across the galactic disk. As a result, the outer stars are not isolated. They are supported by the collective tension of the ether that binds the entire galaxy. What appears to astronomers as extra gravity or dark matter is, in fact, the natural outcome of this interconnected medium. The geometry of the ether amplifies the gravitational influence of visible matter without the need to invoke invisible halos or unknown particles. Augmented Newtonian dynamics therefore restores Newton's law without altering its mathematics. It simply redefines the medium through which gravity acts, showing that a universal ether makes galactic dark matter halos unnecessary. Why augmented Newtonian dynamics discounts dark energy? The idea of dark energy arises from the belief that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate, an inference drawn largely from measurements of the cosmic microwave background radiation, CMBR. These observations are interpreted under the assumption that the CMBR is relic radiation, a fading echo from the Big Bang itself. But this interpretation ignores the vast majority of the universe's actual mass. More than 99% of the cosmos consists of extremely low-density regions, areas containing only 1 or 2 particles per cubic meter. These regions are dismissed as too diffuse to influence the radiation balance, yet they collectively constitute almost the entire volume of space. To leave them out of the calculation is to leave out the universe itself. Augmented Newtonian dynamics incorporates this missing mass through the mechanics of the virtual photon ether, the same continuum that accounts for gravity and galactic structure. In this view, the CMBR is not a relic from the past but a present-day phenomenon, the continuous low-level photon activity of the ether itself. It is the steady, ever-renewed radiation of a living universe, not the afterglow of a dead explosion. Thus, the need for dark energy disappears. The universe is not accelerating into emptiness, it is dynamically balanced within a medium whose energy is both constant and univer. Closing statement. At present, the universe appears to be in a state of equilibrium, a vast system balanced through the constant exchange of energy between matter and the ether. This equilibrium may even echo what Einstein once sought to describe with his cosmological constant, a universe neither expanding uncontrollably nor collapsing, but delicately poised. Yet such balance cannot be taken for granted. The same processes that sustain stability could, under unknown conditions, lead to imbalance, a subtle shift in the energy of the ether, or a cumulative change in the alignment of its photons. No one can say when, or in what manner, the balance might tip. What we observe today is harmony, not finality. The cosmic microwave background radiation, once thought to be a fading relic of the Big Bang, is better understood as the steady radiance of a living universe, a universe that endures, but may yet evolve in ways we cannot foresee.